Sai is right. Today, let me back up. Let me do this right. Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris. I do that. I sigh a lot anyway. I think it's a good way to relieve like minor amounts of stress. You can kind of expire these tense feelings. Now sighing doesn't work for all of these, like the more intense feelings and things that you're going to have to process in different ways, but it is a great way to expire some of the milder forms of tension. And then it's a way of expressing just like a degree of like physical and spiritual fatigue, man, that I know I'm not alone in the ways that I view the world. I'm coming to understand it and think more about the gifts that God has given me when it comes to this, and how I relate to other people. And it used to be that when I was a kid, I had a really strong desire to relate, like on a different level. And now, it's becoming more and more clear to me as time goes by that the way that I will be able to most organically do this, in the most authentic way, would be through the delivery of the messages that God places on my heart. And I would be lying if I didn't say out loud the following, that I have a human experience when it comes to sharing messages and my experiences and strength and hope. And then, it's peculiar when in your direct environment you hear the same, or you hear people expressing the same, almost sometimes verbatim, the things that you say or have said to them. And it's tough because you want, at the same time, want to be like, wow, this is great. This is God working through me, and this is getting through to a person, and now they're delivering this said message to other people. And maybe there's someone who different audiences will be more apt to listen to and connect with than me, because sometimes there's a barrier there. It's difficult. Where I struggle with that right now is I have a hard time, not with so much the neglectful nature, I think, of not giving me credit, but like even just like a nod, one that I would understand, or even just saying, in a conversation with someone, I was inspired in this way when I heard this shared, and this is so, or when I heard this shared in a conversation with me, this was powerful, and I want to. None of that stuff goes on. The hard part for me, the struggle, is the disingenuous nature by which some people, and I realize that there's limited things. I'm limited by ways to kind of mitigate that, right? But it's just hard. It doesn't feel good. It feels very false and shallow. If I place myself in this person's shoes, like what would motivate me to pretend that this was something that was or has been important to me, or this was an original thought, or that you can see where an individual's ego will come in and disallow them from saying, hey, I don't want the world to perceive me as being inspired by anyone else, especially someone who I view as beneath me. So I'm going to risk, being somewhat fraudulent here in my presentation. And I don't think it's somewhat, I think it's really fraudulent. But it nonetheless, I struggle there because in my mind, I have one set of thoughts, and then my heart tugs at me a different way. And the way that my heart tugs at me, these messages they say things that are softer, more thoughtful, and they say, well, maybe this message was impactful for this person, but something has happened to them, right? Something has happened to them that makes it nearly impossible for them to not be the main character. It makes it nearly impossible for them to, even if it's in their mind alone, be seen as equal to someone else who, again, they view as beneath them. And that's something that I deal with. I recognize that, my experience in this life, that's going to be something that I continue to struggle against, just because of my history. But anyway, circling back to the kinder things that my heart suggests for me, and I think that these are nudgings from my higher powers, like, hey, you're touching somebody. Like, this is touching someone. No matter if they feel like in this moment that they're gaining some form of power or leverage with this, let them have it. I mean, let them have it, because I've given it to you, and God didn't give this to me for me to curate and keep to myself, right? And God didn't give me these gifts and messages to use for attaboys and, shine, so to speak. Like, God delivered these messages to me because he also gave me ability to deliver these messages. And not just about him, but about other things, in a way that I know, because people reflect it back to me, that is impactful to people. And I have to come to terms with the fact that a percentage of the people who are going to be impacted by this message, or any of the messages, they're not going to play by the rules. They're going to continue to manipulate. They're going to continue to be malevolent and lie and be disingenuous and, try to disproportionately, grade the playing field in their favor and not in mine. I mean, it's just there's not a lot I can do about that. And were I to become more concerned with that than the work that I truly believe in my heart that I've been called to do, I think that I would be working against, and this is going to be presumptuous, but working against what I believe in my heart are God's plans for me, right? And that is not to focus, I've said this before, like, this is not to focus on an individual, because that is, Petty Chris is alive and well, and while there are parts of me that want to dig right into the fights like that, it's not worth it. They're not worth it, I can give to them a love that God gives me, and I don't have to include them, in everything that I do, and hey, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is powerful, like, more and more as I use this platform and I understand, that more and more people are viewing the content, and more people are viewing the content that interact with me, but they don't want me to know, but they tell me that they interact with me and view the content because when they speak to me now, my message is there, which is, I guess, that's incredible, right? Like, that's incredible for someone who, I'm working this out in real time, Joe, but for someone who has for most of their life felt pretty voiceless, set apart, and invisible. I suppose that's a good thing, and I'm not being facetious or petty at all. I really do believe that I need to reframe it this way. That, like, hey man, where does creativity come from? Where do ideas come from? Where is there like a bank of them somewhere? You know what I mean? Like, I believe that these things flow into us, through a connection. Some of us have a different and stronger connection than others to a higher consciousness, that being a higher power. So they don't belong to me. So letting go of that part and disconnecting that portion of my ego from it, I guess I have a bit more understanding now, and great, man, like I say, cool, they're your ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like, cool, they're your ideas. You know what I mean? The thing about this is, though, bear in mind, y'all, now, these are things that I'm working out for myself so that internally I don't get distracted by this stuff. I do want to offer this bit of cautionary guidance. I would urge you, if you've been inspired by something they've said or done, figure out a way that you can settle with, that is going to do a couple of things. First, it's going to pay respect and credit to whoever inspired you. Second, it's going to be more I'll put it this way. The second, it will allow you to continue to grow with that idea or that message. What's difficult is, unless you're really good at intuiting these things and like picking up on the subtler things that most people miss, it's going to be really difficult for you to flush out that portion of a statement or an idea in a genuine way, right? Because you don't know the emotional connection that, say, me or another person had to an issue or an idea that just naturally will flow in a direction, and there will be a progression that's obvious. Whereas if on the other side you were asked to expand on just that section, and this will happen, just asked to expand on this little section, what you're going to be forced to do then is put on your tap shoes, and I hope you can move. And you're just going to have to start dancing around in circles. And I watch people do this every day. And sometimes I'm embarrassed for them. Sometimes I pity them. Sometimes I want to step in to rescue them. But look, man, you make your own bed. You gotta lie in it. So, and that I just offer that is some cautionary guidance. Believe enough in yourself and take some time to be still with God, and trust me, if God will give you what you need. If God wants to use you in a way, that's what's going to happen, right? And it's not your will. It's not what you want God to do with you. It's what God wants to do with you. So, there's that. It's a lot of God talk. But God has saved my life. So, recently, I've done my best to come back to focusing on solutions, right? So we do in advocacy and activism, there are different things. You got to organize, you got to agitate, you got to disrupt, you got to identify and highlight, but then you also, the big part of that, the goal, right, is you have to, if you want to dismantle something, then you need to be prepared to usher in at least an outline of something new, so a solution, right? And solutions for all populations of people, I mean, from anywhere, and we all find this, whether to what degree, but life is just challenging, period. So what then do we do? What do we do? Do we fix things within society? Do we reinvest in communities that are, that have been divested, right? Or disinvested, whatever the hell. Words are hard today. But where are we looking for solutions? Well, it is my belief that we should seek moral reformation, right? So what does that mean? It means that God should be and is the first place of refuge, first source of strength, and where we go for guidance and where we go for answers. It can feel like they don't come from God when we are so focused on the secular, world, right, where we occupy all of our time, seemingly. It might seem that the solutions come from different things, but God puts those there for us, right? So given any circumstance, anywhere in the world, where do you go? You go to God. Sorry, I lost my notes. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody, but that I'm going to bring it up. So specifically for black people, there would be no other place to turn but God. And similarly, there would be no other place to turn for addicted people but to God. Now, you might be curious about what this coupling here, right? Because these two populations may seem pretty distant. Because anybody can be addicted. Black people, fat people, skinny people, tall people, white people, brown people, red people, yellow people, doesn't matter. Anybody can be addicted. It's not an exclusively black problem. And I would probably agree on all but one level, right? So the one thing that we can all be sure of is the point of intersection here, which is what both populations face a unique and distinct set of problems. So nowhere else in the world, and that's not to say that we have it the worst here, but nowhere else will you find in the world the same set of problems faced than those presented and faced by the American blacks. Nowhere. Because our experience here has been so defining, polarizing, and unique. Now, have similar things occurred in other parts of the world? Sure. But they're not these problems. Now, that's the same thing with addicted populations. Now, I could see a degree of space available to argue that largely across the world, addiction is addiction. Yeah. Back to the point. The solution, moral reformation, that internal transformational change, can only be found by and through God. That's it. And the incredible part about that is it's not because we're human, it's not a guarantee that we will never make mistakes again. It's not a guarantee that we will never have a relapse. It's not a guarantee that we won't have human experiences ever again, because we will. Because the goal of this reformation, the goal of this connection to God, isn't physical perfection. It isn't perfection in this world. It is spiritual perfection. Let that sink in. And what happens, so in my experience, when I share with people, like when I was impacted by the system in various ways, but particularly when my family was disrupted and I had to go through all that stuff, and then also with addiction, right? Like, first, we have to separate those two things, right? Because there's a trauma that I went through with having my family disrupted, and there was my addiction and the trauma attached to that. This new trauma that was stacked on top, right? That's not you can't lump those all together because they have to be they must be separated, right? There is an overall solution that these smaller and more defined solutions, respective solutions for each, come into play. The overall solution is God, and then God will give you the individual tools respective to each issue, right? So the overall, my relationship with God, that set a personal and moral standard for my life that was so incredibly high that everything else, I'm talking about man's law, everything that was required of me by the system to address my deficiencies as a parent, substance use disorder issues, trauma from childhood, PTSD, all these other things all fall under the larger umbrella of the protection of God. While there, God gave me the tools and stamina to interact with each set of these issues, because you must understand that we have to maintain there are differences here, and the differences mean that we have to have different approaches within this larger solution. Follow that? So the approach that I took to addressing my substance use disorder issues by way of treatment, aftercare, IOP, meetings, social recovery support groups, all that stuff, tied together with the larger solution being God. But these are tools specific to that issue. We have to separate that. Otherwise, everything gets jumbled up, and we have... so similarly to what happened to black people in the United States, instead of acknowledging that we are disproportionately affected by poverty in ways that are different than other populations of people, right? And having even if just a finite, but a set of resources exclusively to address these distinct issues. We were just lumped in as poor. So what that means is all of the people who fall under this poor umbrella, there's one pot of resources. So everybody gets less and stays poor. Right? Same thing applies here. That's why God gives us distinct sets of tools to deal with and mitigate and remedy and process all these different things, right? So the trauma from my childhood can't be processed in the same way with the same approach as the trauma that I had from having my kids removed. They're two different things. Just as the issues attached to my substance use addiction or my addiction disorder, none of these other things are going to be the tools appropriate to apply here to process and recover from this stuff. Is that starting to make sense? You can't just throw one approach in tactic at a handful of problems. Similarly, you can't just throw a bunch of hands at a problem because you're going to end up with an anthill. I don't know if any of y'all ever jumped anybody or if you've been jumped by anybody, but it's the worst to be jumped by two people, right? Because they got tons of space and opportunity to pay attention to. So you got yourself being jumped and two people you have to pay attention to, right? As an individual jumper, one of the parties that's jumping, I have to pay attention to the person that I'm hitting and the person who's with me who is hitting the person I'm hitting, right? So those things are easy to manage. If there's 4 or 5, none of us are going to get any licks in, right? And as a person who's being jumped by like 4 or 5 people, I'm telling you, I have been. It's not as bad as getting jumped by 2 because I've been jumped by both. So anyway, that's the point on that. Solutions. There are not a lot of new problems faced by society today that need brand new approaches, right? We have approaches and remedies and solutions that work. The issue is they take work. Society, by and large today, is comprised of a distinct percentage of people who bemoan that effort. They don't want to put in the effort requisite to the result, right? This is a mistake. This is a mistake. Most of the time in your life, you will be able to, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed. Feelings of overwhelm generally come from an internal drive to handle too much at once. Not that it has to do with it a bit, that you are faced with many tasks or many problems that need attention or feel like they need attention and need to be solved or resolved immediately. Most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, that's just an internal mechanism attached to what, I don't know, you'd have to figure that out for yourself, but generally, I've found in my life that I can usually do pretty well alleviating some of those feelings of overwhelm and anxiety by prioritizing by level of need or urgency the issues that I'm faced. Like, obviously, you're going to have things in your life that need your attention regularly in order to maintain, like, function. Like eating, and kids need heat, and, warm water and beds and clothes and shit like that, and protection, but you don't have to secure all of these things at the same time. Does that make sense? So once they have clothes, we just, monitor them, make sure that they've not grown too big for them or that they're in disrepair and that they don't need new ones, right? We just kind of stay on top and, we maintenance level energy these things. That comes from prioritization. So, a solution that works for me is stack all my problems up, or line all my problems up proverbially in front of me or metaphorically in front of me, right? And I look at them, okay, in order of need, which should I pay more attention to first? So, okay, I start to organize them, and then I just kind of like in my mind, I visualize them as being stacked one in front of another in a line, right? Oh, okay, now there's that. That's a great tool to manage stress and reduce anxiety. So from there, I can just focus on the one in front of me because I can't see the others behind it because this one is blocking it. That forces me to address the problem or issue in front of me, complete it, set it aside, grab the new one. Here's the kicker. No matter how quickly you resolve or get through, not to say that you should be slow and take your time. You should set a manageable pace. But don't kill yourself because there's still going to be work to do, right? So one thing at a time, we knock these things over, or we line them up, or we knock them over. Now, based on what it is, you're going to have to apply a different solution, right? You're not going to be able to apply, again, as an example, just for ease of use, this may be a bit lazy, but say this in front of me is a recovery support group. I haven't been in a week. What is my solution? I go to a recovery support group, okay? The one behind it, kids need pants. What's my solution? I go shopping, okay? Well, maybe money's a little tight. What do? Okay, well, I look at my budget. Where can I trim the fat? There's a solution for everything. So, taking the time to slow down will drastically increase your ability to manage your problems and stress and drastically reduce the amount of stress and anxiety attached to these problems. And what you will find, as I do, is that degrees of this anxiety and stress that we self-impose on ourselves is just that. It's self-imposed. It's not real, right? One way to ensure that we will have at least a pathway or an idea or a place to go to look or ask is if our lives are governed by a larger, more powerful, more connected source of energy than ourselves. That being a higher power, that higher power being God. If you didn't do it on the way in, think about doing it on the way out. Hit that like, subscribe, and post notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the cool, badass tomfoolery and otherwise wacky and zany stuff we talk about here on the Bees Like That podcast. And check it out. If it wasn't your idea, come on, dog. Just say so. It's all good. Peace, y'all.